I'd like to start off, though, with the city manager and our fire chief that are here. We can answer some questions about what has been our response to date, what we've been doing over the last couple of months, and then we'll turn it over to Mayor-elect Brockman and our assistant city manager, Jordan Matney, and our economic development director, Jeff Jewell, to talk about what responses they have planned to roll out in the days, weeks, and months ahead. They've been active, they've been at work, there have been a number of meetings, and they're ready to get started in helping our community reopen. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to our city manager, Robert Camarino.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to really share with you what we've been doing as an organization to respond to this crisis. And I will tell you that as an organization, we have continued to serve. Now, we've had to serve under some modifications and restrictions, but just like everyone else has had to. And we've also had to suspend certain types of activities or even close certain facilities, all because our top priority has always been the health and safety of not only our residents, our customers, but also our staff. And over time, we have again, modified our operations, modified our services. In fact, if you've come to City Hall, you've seen one of those modifications here, in that if you've come here to apply for a building permit, you're now go to a station whereby you can fill out a building permit application. If you have any questions, then there's a phone right there that you pick up and are able to speak directly to one of our staff. We continue, based upon the governor's executive orders, to reopen facilities and amenities, as well as expand a number of different services. And so, we obviously have opened our river parks under limited capacity, again, in order to create an environment by which social distancing is possible to protect the health and safety of our customers, but also our staff. And we're working on reopening plans for DOS Rec, which will reopen on May 18th. We have expanded services at the library. The library has always provided a service. In fact, we were providing curbside very early on, and then suspended or paused that for a brief moment, and then resumed those curbside services, and yet have even expanded those services by providing printed material pickup as well as public access to our computers at our facilities. We're working on a number of different reopening plans, one of those obviously being for DOS Rec, and we'll be providing information very soon to all of our members about the protocols that you will experience as you come to our facility. Now, we're only allowed to open at 25% capacity, so there will obviously be a number of changes, but again, we're finalizing those protocols so that we can inform you as to what to expect when you come to DOS Rec, and we're certainly looking forward to seeing you again. But a number of other facilities that we're working on reopening plans, so municipal court, and as well as some other facilities that we are still awaiting on guidance from the governor. One of those being splash pads. If you recall, in the last executive order, splash pads were to remain closed. So if you go to Fisher Park, you'll see the splash pad that is actually closed, so still. And a number of other amenities, even in our land to park, that remain closed, again, awaiting for guidance, but also reviewing those on a case-by-case basis. Green waste will resume as well. We've had to allocate the green waste personnel over to residential pickup because more people being home generates more residential trash. And so in order to make sure that we're able to pick up those services on a timely basis, we've had to allocate those resources there. But as more and more businesses begin to reopen, we'll then be able to phase that service back in. I'm also very proud of some other things that we've been able to do in response to this crisis. One of those is a testing site partnership that we partnered with Comal County, New Braunfels Utilities, New Braunfels Independent School District, and Comal Independent School Districts, as well as a group of volunteer doctors within our community to begin doing some testing here in our community. And Chief O'Connell can certainly speak to that greater, but that was another example of the kind of partnerships that we have valued over the years that have allowed us to be a much more successful, effective, and productive community. We've also received an allocation of personal protective equipment, PPE, to distribute to local health providers that Chief O'Connell can certainly speak to as well. But that, again, is an effort to provide the much-needed equipment to be able to protect our local health providers. And with that, I'd like to turn over to Chief O'Connell to briefly speak to you about those things, testing site and PPE.
Thank you, sir. The New Braunfels Fire Department worked with Comal County Department of Public Health and Dr. Overman and also Drs. Thompson and Drs. Kelly to set up this drive-through testing facility that local physicians could use. And that was done early on when there was a shortage of testing supplies. Our personnel have been trained to administer those tests. Physicians can order those tests based on the patient's symptoms. The patient simply drives up. Our responders administer the swab, package the test, and it gets shipped off to the appropriate lab. That provides a one-stop shop for these folks. It keeps them out of the physician's offices, and they get their results, in a relatively quick time of 24 to 48 hours, depending on how many tests CPL has to process or the other labs. That's been very successful. Our members are also attached as part of a quick response force that is administering testing to nursing homes in Region 8, should they be requested, and we have administered 400 of those tests in just the last couple of weeks. Additional testing will be forthcoming for nursing homes as well. We've received a request from the Texas Division of Emergency Management to assist testing of all nursing homes and nursing home staff within the city of New Braunfels, and that actually happened today. So we'll begin that process very soon. As far as the PPE allotment that we received 2 allotments of personal protective equipment from Region 8, the DSHS Region 8, and that has been distributed from our EOC to local primary care physicians that have requested it. We have an ample supply of that still, so we're in good shape as we move into the next phase of reopening.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, we've also tried to keep our community informed by issuing frequently asked questions or highlights of the governor's plan to open Texas, for example, as well as some do's and don'ts, just to try to keep our community informed about those things that are occurring within our community, the information that's coming to us from the governor's office. We've also, actually on March the 25th, opened a hotline where we had library staff that staffed those hotlines. And since March 25th, we've actually been able to assist over 1,500 calls to that hotline. And that hotline remains open, so anyone that still has any questions, please contact 830-221-4222.
I would like to mention that testing partnership opened up on April the 6th. Those tests began on April 6th and have steadily increased over time. And so certainly a great evidence of a partnership. Also, the city of New Braunfels worked with local businesses. The governor's orders, which we have followed since GA 18, which obviously made it mandatory. We anticipated that to be the case, and we knew that there'd be a substantial amount of material in those executive orders. So we assembled a business group of volunteers who could help work with us in interpreting the 66-page reopening booklet that was provided by the governor, as well as the executive orders, and they have been invaluable in making it simplified so that our community is as educated on what the rules are and so how we can follow them in an effort to give the greatest meaning to the reopening plan, because clearly we want our businesses open, our citizens confident that we are abiding by the rules, and the only way we can do that is making it easy to understand to all. I have exactly 13 days and 2 hours, a little over 2 hours, left as mayor, and have been at my last council meeting. And to my right, Rusty Brockman, our mayor-elect, will be taking over at the next meeting. But he has taken over a lot sooner than he had expected with a number of tasks. September of last year, as he was announcing his campaign, the mayor-elect shared with me and many others that he wanted to see our community working just that much harder with area businesses, albeit from manufacturing to retail, to assist them in succeeding here in this community. And that was well before the current crisis. So I want to say we started this conversation very quickly, and you leaped right into it at the end of the spring break week, knowing full well that there were going to be recovery efforts that were necessary. And I can't think of a better person to be stepping into this role. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to you, Mayor-elect Brockman.
Well, thank you, Mayor Castile. This chair is not fitting very well right now yet, so maybe someday it will soon, but I feel kind of uncomfortable sitting in your chair. You've done a magnificent job, Baron, for the last 6 years, and it's been a great opportunity to have worked at the Chamber as a Director of Economic Development my last few years with you as mayor, because during those 17 years we had a pretty good relationship with the city staff, and that's really important to me as your mayor, your incoming mayor, to be able to continue that kind of relationship so that we can build on what has been brought here in the past. We have got a terrific heritage here, and I know we didn't get to celebrate it in the right way, but the announcement was made Monday night by Ann Miller from the team that's been working on the 175th. That in March of 2021, we'll be able to take up those celebrations, and so we all look forward to that opportunity. But just a couple of things that I've thought about over these last several months. Our forefathers came here, no matter where they were from, whether Germany or Spain or Mexico, they came here to find a place to live, and they found a beautiful place. And one of the first things that they founded was First Protestant Church and St. Peter and Paul Catholic Church. And there was a mission here, and there were other things that were created as they worked with the local folks who were Native Americans that were living here in this beautiful place. It's built on a strong work ethic. Our community works hard, we're proud, and we will not let anything like this COVID idea put us any further back than what we absolutely have to be, just because of some of the constraints that have been brought about by stepping back and getting healthy again. And so as we move forward, our staff at the city has done a terrific job of not only working and recruiting businesses along with the Chamber of Commerce and the EDF and NBU and all the others in the community that are all partners, and I appreciate the fact that Robert brought that up. Partnerships have been a terrific thing for our community. It's not an I thing. This recovery team that we're putting in place, if you've been involved in sports anywhere, you know that the coach always says there's no I in team. Well, that's for sure. There is no I in team. It's all of us working together. And when Barron mentioned about last September and some of the things looking forward, those were built upon the fact that I had some experience working in economic development and knew what this community was working hard to do to bring and grow wealth and to bring in new jobs. And so we don't want to stop that. In fact, we want to be involved in bringing that back and hopefully easing the pain a little bit of what this virus issue has caused. I have a lot of faith in God, and I have a lot of faith in our community because, again, our community was founded based on a good religious background back in the day in 1845, and that has continued throughout our community over the 175 years. And so a few things that I want to share with you today. One, the Chamber and the city and NBU and EDF are all working together to come up with a plan to be able to help our small business community get back reopen. And they've already done that based upon the governor's GA 21, correct? It was 21 that came out. They've already done that to a certain extent, but there's still those who are waiting for their time to flip on the switch. There are those that have not missed a beat, even though they've been doing things a whole lot different. No matter whether it's the ones that haven't missed a beat doing it different, or whether it's those who are still waiting to open their doors, there's a lot of difficulty in keeping people on board, keeping people with jobs, being able to recover from something like this. There are several things that our community, our city has already done. They approved Monday night council under the direction of Barron and Mayor Pro Tem Peters and others, approved the waivers for expanding our businesses to some of the sidewalks to where they can expand there and not have that count against them for their 25%. Great opportunity to be able to do this. They are expanding and waiving some of those fees that some of the businesses have to come up with. They have already put in place assistance through the chamber and the website, through the city's website, assistance through our local SBDC, which is a partnership with our Spark Small Business Development Board and the Small Business Development Center, which is a partnership with the University of Texas at San Antonio. Larry New and his team have been working really hard way back from March when all of this started, counseling with small business folks or business folks. I shouldn't continue to just say small because some of these are large businesses, on how they can work, what can they do, how can they access some of these funds from not only the local level, but state and federal level funds. And so through that, one of the first things that happened is that our team got together and asked Ppe for some additional funds to be able to put at the SBDC to hire some additional staff. Mr. New and his team were buried with meeting after meeting, and they've done a great job in being able to handle those counseling sessions, but you can only do so many in a 27-hour day because that's what he said he was cramming into 24s with his. And so the additional staff has put them in a position to be able to have additional counselors, additional people answering the phone, and being able to spread the word about what are those opportunities that are out there, whether they be local or state or federal opportunities. And so we're working hard to be able to make that happen. And we want those small businesses to recover quickly. We want those folks who have been out of work and have unfortunately had to apply for unemployment. And maybe 90% of those folks have never done that before. And so there's some issues that people deal with there, not only trying to get the proper forms filled out, but also trying to deal with that in their heart. It's the pride, again, is something that's really important in our community. This diverse economy has become important to our community because there's so many different things that make this happen. So the tourism side is an opportunity for us to assist. The small business, the industrial, the manufacturing, we have those ways to be able to do that we are researching with this economic development recovery team that we have, again, organized. It brings people from, again, the city, elected officials, the chamber, Ppe, the Small Business Development Center, Spark Board, the Economic Development Foundation, Manufacturers Association, the Downtown Association, the tourism industry here, the Central Texas Technology Center, and all that they do to re-career and retrain folks, and also work with our employers to be able to train up new folks in their businesses, and then the local workforce career center. And so those are many of the people that are at the table coming up with this plan that we hope to roll out or tie on to what's already been rolled out, I think we should say, because again, there's been a lot of hard work already put in place. And some of my goals that I would like to see that we've been working on is to support all the local efforts that are in place and that are currently underway. That's very important. Prepare short-term recovery goals, and I think we've already started putting those goals together. We know what we want to do, and we've kind of been using the guidance of the governor's orders as we put people back open. We'll develop a long-term sustainable goals through this. You can't expect it to just open and, okay, here we are, what do we do next? We want this to be a long-term sustainable opportunity for our business community so that next year at this time and 5 years down the line at this time, they are still successful, still seeing customers, still doing what they want to do and have been doing for so long in our great community. And then build a plan using things learned from this issue that we've been going through now to prepare for the challenges of the future. And so if we've got to be prepared for all of this. And so I'm really pleased to say that we have some opportunities to work not only with some city funds that could be worked out through the efforts of this team, but also with 4B funds, also with other funding mechanisms that we can put together. We have a great resource from the Texas Economic Development Council, as well as some other examples of programs that have been put in place in San Antonio and all of the state of Texas, where they are meeting the needs of their communities, small business folks already. And so as we look at those and evaluate which one fits best for our community and what the needs are, then we will be able to develop our program to where we can invite people to come in, sit down and tell us a little bit about your business. What is the biggest need that you might have? We'll have a very simple application process and then be able to understand that we can't fill their needs to hundreds of thousands of dollars, but we can help and assist on levels where people who are hurting and need to just turn the lights on right now can get back to work. But we can't do it again. We can't do it by ourselves. Council can't do it by themselves. It takes a team effort. And this team effort has been going on, again, like I said, has been going on for a long time. The recruiting at the level that we have done in this community for the last 15, 20, 25 years has been very important, using the chamber as a resource and using our staff here at the city as a resource, and to be able to continue those efforts. May not be at 100% like we were doing prior to the virus. This may take a little bit of a back seat doing that recruiting and going and looking for those big industries outside the state of Texas or outside the country. What's most important at this time, and what one of my goals is, like I said, is to help the local folks. And if we can do that with funds that we have here in our community, then it's extremely important for us to step up and to be able to give that. And it's not a handout like the food bank says, it's a hand up. Let's support them in a way that they can step back into doing what they were doing, even though there's going to be a lot of gap there. We understand that. We've never done this before. None of us have ever been through an issue like this before. But if we all work together and we help where we know we can, and we help with the resources that we have as a community, it will make everybody's job getting back to normal a little bit easier and a little bit faster. I've taken probably too much time. I'll give it to anybody else who would make any comments. Jordan and Jeff, would y'all like to make any comments about where we're headed? Jeff has prepared a long list of things, and I don't want to read those, but that long list of things will be the ways that we will be working with all of our partners to be able to make this effort become a reality. But paramount is what Robert and the chief said at the very beginning. We want this to be a safe and healthy recovery for our entire community. We know that there are issues out there that we will be dealing with for a long time that have to do with the COVID-19 pandemic. our staff and team has done a great job of being prepared for that and using the governor's direction and using healthcare workers' direction, CDC direction on doing the right things. We got to remember to wash hands. We got to remember the social distancing and the safe activities like here at the council chambers where we're meeting in this afternoon. And so those are all things that I think we have become part of our daily routines. And so as we know that and we continue to work to keep our community safe and healthy, we will continue to work hard for our small business group too. Would you guys like to make any comments?
Thank you, Mayor-elect Brockman. I would just like to add, I know that there's been a lot of information today. We have a lot of programs that we have rolled out already for economic recovery and that we're working on. And if you have questions as a business owner or representative throughout the city, please reach out to us directly. You can, of course, view our website or call our hotline, but you can call me directly or Jeff, who is our Director of Economic and Community Development, and we can help in any way that we can. Thank
Great
you.
point, yes. The website's here, the website at the chamber, the website and things, and helpful points at the SBDC, the Small Business Development Center. It's 940 West San Antonio Street, and you can call there and get an appointment. But what we want you to understand is that we are working hard to be prepared for you, and that's what this team is doing, and I'm just proud to be part of it, and I look forward to the opportunities that we have going forward from today.
Any questions? Can we answer questions? That's why we've got everyone here, if there are any questions.
Yes. So recently, the chair of the Federal Reserve said that up to 40% of people making $40,000 or less are unemployed nationwide. And the nonprofits here are obviously under a lot of strain. We had the McKenna Foundation CEO recently call into a meeting, city council meeting, saying that there was a big shortfall in revenue for nonprofits. Is there any material aid that's being offered to these nonprofits to help them out, to make sure that these people that are hardest hit locally are, getting the things they need, whether that's money or other resources?
Jeff, do you want to talk about CDBG and some of the others?
Sure, I think I can begin to answer that question. Warren, you are correct. We anticipate that, this, I think everybody can read the news reports that the unemployment is going to be pretty deep and sustained, and the folks that are going to be hit the hardest are our most vulnerable populations. As a recognition of that, the Department of Housing and Urban Development did allocate a significant amount of money to states and localities with additional community development block grant kind of disaster recovery funds, and the city has actually been allocated about $243,000. That recently went to City Council. I think the next public hearing for that, there's a certain set of procedures that HUD requires the city to go through and undertake. But those funds were actually requested applications from agencies. I believe that those applications have been received, and so those funds are going to likely be distributed back out to those agencies that are serving our most vulnerable populations.
And to follow up on that, is there anything in addition to that? Because the survey that was answered by a group of local nonprofits was saying there was a 7-figure loss across all of them. And frankly, $236,000 is going to be a drop in the bucket for them. Is there anything, and those funds are state funds, as you said, is there anything on the local level that is being done to assist these nonprofits?
Except for the CDBG, I don't believe that there are any plans for that, but that is certainly something that can be discussed. I don't know of any other funds unless I'm drawing a blank on anything.
As far as financially, no, but we did put together a group so that our nonprofits were talking to one another and so that they could see where there were gaps initially early on. That funding from CDBG is the first bit of funding. In addition to that, we just received indication from, or letter from the governor and the lieutenant governor and speaker about additional funding our community would receive through the federal disaster recovery monies that have been allocated to states and then to counties and then to cities, and how that would be distributed. And of course, that we just received 2 days ago. So, I mean, the first bit obviously was CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant Program. And the great part about that is that we're going right through and using our nonprofits to deliver those resources, as Jeff Jewell stated. Instead of trying to recreate the wheel, use those nonprofits who know their community, know our community, and have the ability to have the greatest impact. And that's the first start.
In fact, the public hearing is actually the very next council meeting, May 26th.
Our mayor-elect's first council meeting.
And good point. I'm glad Barron mentioned that, because that was something that came out from the governor's office in a meeting day before yesterday. I think it was 1.85 billion that was going to go to counties under 500,000 population. Is that right?
Correct.
And so it will be a partnership, again, working with the county to be able to access those funds. Just hopefully it doesn't take months to get here, right? So we'll be working on that. That's a good point. Thank you, Warren.
Okay. We'll write with the Herald Zeitung. How many businesses were affected or impacted by the virus? I think you did this survey of 91 businesses that you just got the results in, but I think that there was have you done any sort of impact on,
Well, we
like all of them?
yeah, so I mean, we distributed the survey to thousands of businesses. We only got 91 responses. I mean, I think it's safe to say that every business has been affected, but every business is not affected the same way. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to study and understand a little bit better. I mean, I think that it's obvious that there are certain industries that are impacted the most. We have a lot of those types of industries in town and contribute significantly to our local economy. But in terms of, a quantifiable number of businesses, I mean, I would probably say most, if not all of them, have been affected in some form or fashion.
And just by the survey alone, it indicated they need financial assistance the most, 78%.
Financial assistance was the highest.
Yeah,
was the highest requested assistance. Yes.
The next stage of when the governor allows, have you heard anything about the governor's next announcement? Like, will it be tomorrow, or will it be the Friday reopening of? He's going to at some point address reopening bars, massage parlors, so on and so forth. What have y'all heard about that?
The current order, which is GA 21, we had a GA 21. We had a press conference from the governor's office on May 5th, and we received the order the following morning from the Attorney General's office in answering a number of our questions. And I can't say enough about the state's assistance and response to our questions. But we anticipate next week, clearly there are provisions in GA 21 that take effect on the 18th. But we anticipate next week that Governor Abbott, based on the information that he is receiving from all the regions and county health departments throughout our state, will be making, as he had stated previously, he'll be making the next step based on that information. And we don't know what that date is. We receive that call regularly from local businesses. I don't get as many calls as the hotline, but I had 4 this morning about that question. What's next? When will I be able to open? And the answer is we don't know. We rely on the governor's order as they're precedent. They set the precedent, and so when he does open that, we'll be ready. And we are the city staff and many that are not here on this dais, it wouldn't be fair, it's not an accurate description to say they scramble, but they breakneck speed when we get the governor's order. Jenna Vinson, the city attorney's office, there's another assistant city manager back there. We bust speed records in trying to get the information simplified, deciphered, and then out to the public as quickly as possible and locate. Sometimes we have to fight to locate that order.
No one expected the May 5th stuff to come
no,
up.
but-
That came totally by the surprise to a lot of folks.
But we don't want to be surprised. When it happens, we fight to get the information, and then we engage the disaster council at the AG's office to get those questions answered by our local businesses, because we want them to be able to open at the earliest opportunity that they can, because often what happens, and what happened with GA 21, is that we have a number of businesses that are allowed to have opened already, but have not been able to do so because they haven't been able to acquire the appropriate equipment that's been mandated that they use. And so a number of them are opening up now and in the few days ahead, even though they were allowed to open up earlier. And so our goal here at the city, and I'll let the city manager respond to that as well, our goal at the city is to get them that information at the absolute earliest that we can. And so we don't know when it'll come, but we'll be ready, and we won't, there will not be any time taken to pause and consider. We will bust we will bust the clock in order to get those answers to the appropriate departments and get those responses back.
We've not yet seen a press release about when an announcement or a press conference may be, but when we do, I will tell you, we've got a couple of folks sitting and listening and watching that press conference, and then we are trying like heck to just try to get a hold of a copy of that order, which in many times websites are crashed because there's so many people trying to get that order. But when we do, as the mayor mentioned, when we do, then we work quickly to be able to put that information out to our community. And if it's a rather large document like the governor's report to Open Texas, we try to read it and then try to summarize and put some highlights together, because it's a very long document. Not everyone's going to read it. And so we try to do that. We try to summarize that. But we will get it out just as quickly as we possibly can, as soon as the governor has a press conference. But we've not yet heard.
Oh, and I have just one more question along those lines, and I'll let someone else. But a lot of entities, a lot of legislators and mayors and citizens have been asking for property tax freezes and, property value freezes back to 2019 levels instead of the ones in 2020 that were assessments that would be, as of January 1st, have raised a lot of residential and commercial property tax values, which means their taxes are going to go up. Mr. Camerano, you and I have talked about this briefly before, but how will that affect the city? And isn't the city offering exemptions like to some of these property tax owners, to taxpayers that fall under the homestead exemption?
Well, I'm gonna let you answer that, but I'd like to start it if I may.
Please.
Okay.
We did receive a letter, and we're in the process of responding to that letter. It is our understanding and our opinion that the state is the only authority that can change the appraisal system in the state of Texas. We're in two different appraisal districts, the Comal Appraisal District and the Guadalupe Appraisal District. They are a separate entity, obviously, and those appraisals, as you stated, those appraisals are a time shot of value on January 1 of any given year. And so January 1, our economy was quite strong in New Braunfels. And I want to say that we've grown from when I was first elected in 2014 to today. I think we're we've gone from $4 billion in value to about $8 billion in value. Right. And about $2 billion of that growth is entirely brand new construction in this community, not existing values. And so a lot of businesses have leases that are, and we're aware of that, this team is aware of it, the mayor-elect is very aware of it, that their rents go up based on the appraised value. Now, clearly, the budget for the city of New Braunfels and that tax rate is not set until in the latter part of the summer. And Robert and his team have been working, and they can talk to that. But, you know, the mayor pro tem who's sitting in the back and I both remember that this group of city staff and city administration planned for a disaster and told us about how that plan would work. We didn't think it would be a pandemic in 2014, but they certainly planned for an economic downturn based on a 9/11 event or just a market downturn. And so they've already put that plan into action, and they'll be working on that as they lead up to the mayor-elect's budget, which will be presented in August of this year. But don't, and this is what I get to, as an outgoing mayor, remind everyone, is that the vast majority of your local tax bill, your property tax bill, is a property tax for funding public education, which is mandated by our state constitution. It is our state's obligation to fund public education, and we do it through local property taxes. And if you look at my local tax bill, my property tax bill, more than 60% of it goes to public ed. We've got great public ed, but it goes to public ed. So the only way to offer significant, to alleviate our property tax burden in the days ahead is if the legislature and the governor call a special session. And the governor is the only one that can do it because they only meet every odd year, and it is an even year. So until the governor and the lieutenant governor and the speaker come to that agreement, it won't happen. But you cannot affect and help local businesses if the state isn't willing to take the lead. And that's just simple mathematics. Sorry, city manager.
No, you've actually done a great job, Mayor, in kind of talking about that. It's a policy issue, as I mentioned to you before. It's a policy issue. The tax values are set by the appraisal districts, as you know. And a lot of planning goes into, for example, let's talk about our 2019 bond program. Our 2019 bond program is structured on projections based upon growth in value in our community. In fact, when we went to the voters and said, well, you know, we can do this bond program at the same tax rate, no tax rate impact bond program, that was based on a set of assumptions, one of those assumptions being a growth in taxable assessed valuation. You change that, obviously it could possibly change then the delivery of the bond program. That's one issue. And then you've got the day-to-day operations of the core services that a municipal government provides. That could also be impacted by that. It's a policy discussion. Certainly every year we actually hold a retreat with the city council where we discuss the upcoming budget. We discuss the capital programs. We do a 5-year projection. And this will be one of those items that we discuss with the council. That is the growth in taxable assessed valuation. I can assure you that much of that growth will be protested. And so I know that we will see less than what is actually being noticed currently. But we will certainly present that information, discuss it, and then the council can then provide us some direction on how they want to move forward based upon that value and based upon a tax rate that could obviously impact one way or the other, or the delivery of a bond program or operation and maintenance of our organization. We are like every other business in this community in that we also are impacted by COVID-19. In fact, we have estimated an up to $2.5 million fiscal impact of COVID-19 just in the general fund alone. That's not including the impact to our enterprise funds. So things such as the Civic Center, the golf course, the airport, those are also being impacted because if you recall, we actually had to close some of those facilities, which means less revenue. As the mayor mentioned, though, we have put plans in place to be able to mitigate things such as emergencies, okay? Certainly didn't anticipate a pandemic, but emergencies. And so we are very well positioned as a city to be able to get through this crisis. However, we are certainly being impacted. And fortunately, because of conservative budgeting, growth in our community, but also planning for emergencies and setting aside reserves, we're going to be able to get through this issue. If it becomes greater than 2.5 million that we've currently projected, now, like everyone else, this is a snapshot in time. It could certainly be more than that. Now, we've set plans in place to be able to address those issues, and so we've created a number of different scenarios based on different fiscal impacts and set plans in place to be able to address those. But understand, the city of New Braunfels is also being impacted by COVID-19.
Hi, Leah Durain from KENS 5. My question involves economic recovery with regards to the tourism industry. With regards to planning for the future, do you believe that the tourism dollar is going to kind of make or break the recovery process? And then are tourists, are there any concerns with visitors increasing the risk of any exposure to coronavirus in the future, or will CDC guidelines kind of negate some of that? What is kind of the plan, I guess, for the tourism industry?
Well, I think they stepped up really well with the advisory group that the mayor and city staff put together, brought them to the table, talked to them about what they felt were important things to get them back into business. And of course, some of them didn't get into business right at the beginning. It took some time, but they were taking time because their thoughts and ideas that they brought to the table about how they could do that in a healthy and safe way were all part of the plan that was put into place for the reopening. And so I think what we've seen there is great cooperation with the tourism side. Now they're going to be impacted, and I think I believe it was on the list of one of the things that was bulleted that Jordan and Jeff helped me with on some things that I did not realize were going on, was with the hotel motel tax dollars and not being impacted because they may be lower. There could be a waiver there, and so there will be some help coming on that side. I think every one of our businesses on the tourism side, whether it be hotel motel or whether it's restaurants or whether it's the river outfitters or whomever, are going to work really hard to make sure that as their customers come to them, they are following those rules that the city has put in front of them to be able to make sure people, when they come into them, they're going to stay healthy while they're here. Hopefully they're healthy when they come. And that's something that is, I know that I've heard several conversations over the last week about, well, that's a crapshoot about whether those folks are coming to town healthy or not. And all they're doing is bringing their Houston germs here, and then they go home and leave their Houston germs here. Well, I think that, I'm not sure that's exactly how we ought to be approaching this. We need to approach this with common sense, and I think we need to approach it in a way that we do the right things here that our community's already been doing. And again, they were part of that team to make those decisions on how they reopen and to make sure they reopen in a healthy way. But I think you're right, they're all going to be impacted. We wish they wouldn't have to be impacted so significantly. And it's going to be a slow recovery, but I think that what they have seen through the city's action over the last 2 weeks is that we support those businesses. We want to see them reopen. We don't want them staying with the lock on the door. And I think it's really significant too that the Comal River is now open with the San Antonio Street Bridge being open underneath, which is really good news too. That was something that I think, and again, that's before my time, but I've heard Mayor and others talk about it, and TxDOT too. It was later in the summer for any of this to be happening because of certain circumstances, and so we've had a great contractor, a great city staff working with the contractor, and then of course TxDOT doing their thing to make that happen. So I think that is good news for the outfitters. I've kind of rambled and kind of run around the bush a little bit, but hopefully that answers your question a little bit. But the team effort, those folks being at the table, making those decisions, and then carrying those things out has been really most significant.
One of our primary employers, our primary dollars is tourism. Those are dollars that come from outside the community, and our community lives and breathes and succeeds on that level of money that's generated from outside our community coming here. So, I mean, that's how we have operated, that's how we will always operate. Good rules, asking people to do the right thing and providing them with the information on how to do it, businesses and citizens. That is what we are doing in the state of Texas, and we're doing it, we're doing it as a state. So we have to hope and pray that that's the way it works.
And then this question is pretty open to whoever would like to respond, but in the actual coronavirus response efforts, I know it's fairly uncharted water for a lot of people, but what would you say would be the city's biggest success so far, and what has been something that has been particularly challenging to overcome as we kind of navigate the response efforts?
Well, first off, you go to the gentleman way to my left. He immediately, the chief, put in a strategic resource grant. When you talked about the PPE, you put in that application March the 17th, right in that time frame, because we had already started to receive calls from local physicians letting us know that they did not have enough supplies, and they had people coming to their local medical offices in need of assistance. And we didn't know that grant request would work, because I'll let the chief speak to it. We'd never put one in before, and sure enough, it took about 3 weeks, but that's what we've been distributing, correct?
That's correct. Early on, we recognized that PPE was going to be an issue for all providers. And so we made an early STAR request through the Texas Division of Emergency Management and the South Texas Regional Advisory Committee for PPE resources, and continue to push that information up to those regional and state level resources until we received that allotment of PPE for the local providers. And what that did, that in conjunction with the governor's relaxation of some of the restrictions that have allowed our hospitals to remain in a position to provide emergency services and do some outpatient work. That's been a very successful endeavor. And I think some of the early things that we did as an organization have maintained the service levels to the greatest extent possible. We've managed to keep our workforce healthy, which from a public service standpoint is critical. I think if I had to identify those successes, that would be them.
Immediately after the first meeting that we had, at the County Emergency Management Center, the first thing that the city manager and the fire chief and the police chief started to do was to implement rules, protocols on how their firehouses and the police department would operate, and how they would protect those first responders, because like firehouses, they live together. And if one of them were to be sick, then a whole host of firefighters would end up, and not the least of which, it's very likely a first responder would get and contract COVID-19, because they're out there constantly assisting and helping in a very close proximity, and you can't serve at that level. So those rules have been again developed very early on, but very successful. And then the testing, we had testing at various medical offices, but to have a centralized testing location, which obviously it wasn't planned the week in advance of April the 6th. It took some time to get everybody together and to the table, and to have like Dr. Thompson and Dr. Overman and Dr. Kelly's to put together a protocol, a plan to how to do it. So opening on April 6th meant that it started in March, shortly after the state declared it the state of disaster. So very, very proud of city staff and responding to the challenges, and it's because of that that we have that level of confidence now in our community with I think the last I looked, close to 900 negative tests, well over 1,000 actual tests that have been taken just in Comal County. Right now, I think 7 active cases, and unfortunately 6 fatalities, which were, as we all acknowledge, early on, when no one really understood COVID-19 or were taking precautions. So getting that information out, having that understanding of how to operate was critical and why we are here today. You cannot thank those crisis management people that are with the city and the state and the county. You can't thank them enough for getting us going in the right direction. That's why we're here where we're at.
How many tests were conducted by the drive-through? You say 400?
The number varies. There have been a lot of tests scheduled, so there's about 550 tests scheduled. There's been some no-shows. There are 410 tests conducted at the drive-through by our personnel. Countywide, there is a lot more testing done. We test about 50 people a day through the drive-through, between 50 and 80. It depends on how many people sign up. But depending on where that person is from, the results may not go to Comal County. So if the person drives in from Kendall or from Guadalupe County, the results go back to them, so they're not in the counts. And then we have personnel that are actually testing at different nursing homes. Those personnel have also conducted almost 400 tests. So the counts vary and fluctuate. It depends on where they're going. But when we have a drive-through testing day scheduled, we test between 50 and 80 people.
And we have a number of medical offices that are testing. They're all required to report to the county of where that person lives.
That's correct.
That test and then the test result. And that's why we're at well over 1,000. And then, of course, we had our second National Guard testing site in Comal County. They did that 2 days ago in Garden Ridge, correct?
I think the Garden Ridge one was a third. They did one out in Spring Branch, I believe.
Oh, Spring Branch, sorry.
Yeah, so we've talked a little bit about, how dependent we are on tourism here, and we've talked about how, we have people coming from these larger metro areas that have much more cases confirmed than we do. If we do see a spike in cases on a local level here, as the year goes on and people are coming in for tubing, other tourist events, what power does the city have to institute local restrictions? Or is this something that has to come down from the state? Because we've seen the Attorney General issue judgments on other cities that had tried to enforce stronger restrictions at this time.
My initial response to that would be is that I think the governor's office has appointed those strike teams to be able to handle some of these issues where they see the hot spots that may begin to show up now that things are reopening. But I would have to defer to Mr. Camerino and the chief on the other at this point.
Yeah, certainly, we cannot do anything that is in conflict with the governor's executive orders. And so, however, if it's a city facility, then we certainly could take a look at maybe changing operations or requiring certain things. But globally, I think we would then have to turn to the governor's executive orders at the time and whether or not he would be making any changes, local health officials and guidance from local health officials to determine whether any changes might be necessary.
We haven't been in conflict with the governor's
No.
executive orders. In fact, they've offered immeasurable guidance, and they've made sense.
Yeah.
So we've been able to, without difficulty, use it and follow it.
Yeah, and to clarify, it's not that the city here has been in conflict, but if it did become an issue in the future, is this something that would be considered trying to work that out with the state? How would that be approached?
We would immediately get on the phone we would immediately get on the phone with our state senator, who is actively working with us. And we have 2 local state reps, as well as we've managed to have the state respond very quickly. I mean, we ask a question, and we usually get a response in less than an hour. I will tell you that the state has been very responsive. And don't forget, they are, their operating plan is to look how we are functioning. And one of the key things will be, our hospitals, and how are they impacted? And don't forget all this tracing that the governor keeps on talking about. Where have you been? Who have you been in contact with? So if it's somebody that went to some type of event or some type of business activity somewhere in the state, that will be on their radar of how to change that in an effort to avoid that from occurring. They had an outbreak up in North Texas in some meat processing plants, and so they immediately attacked the problem. And and those are the things that we've had the opportunity to see, just like everyone else. But fortunately, we've not had that occurrence here.
And then just to kind of follow up on that, this one's for the Fire Chief O'Connell. What does the local supply of testing kits look like? Is there any concern, as there was in the early days, that we might run out when people are still requesting tests?
No, we have an ample supply of testing supplies from multiple labs. And, to get back to your earlier question, we're most certainly going to see incidents of new cases, and that's a product of increased testing, and that's a good thing. The more people that we test, we identify those people that are ill with COVID-19. They can be isolated, and we can do the contact tracing that the mayor spoke about, and help isolate that incident of illness and reduce these outbreaks and surges. That is what helps us keep our hospital systems well-positioned to respond to their daily needs and any potential COVID-19 infections.
McKenna Health, I'd like to give a shout out to the McKenna Health Foundation and Alice Jewell, their executive director, who funded go ahead.
The McKenna Foundation actually funded 1,000 test kits early on when we were having a hard time getting test kits from the traditional labs. That combined with the ramp up in test kit production through these traditional labs has ensured that we have an ample supply, and we will have an ample supply for many, many months moving forward.
And again, they've been operating since April 6th. So this wasn't weekend work. This was a commitment by a number of partners to see it through to the end.
Sure. And, sorry, just one more on testing. I'm hoping you can clear this up for residents who might be interested in this, but as far as antibody tests go, there's obviously some big questions on reliability there, and we're starting to see them available at some private labs here. But since we don't know that having antibodies for this confers immunity, is there really a point in taking these antibody tests at this time? What's the value there?
What I would do is I would recommend that someone that is seeking antibody testing consult with their personal care physician to talk about the things that you just brought up. Scientific studies have not confirmed that the development of antibodies confers immunity. Also, an antibody test, like anything else, is a snapshot in time. If you take the test today, you may not have had long enough to develop antibodies, or you may not have been exposed. So the best advice that we can give is to speak with your personal physician about the value of an antibody test, the specificity of the test, and the efficacy of that test.
Any other questions? Well, I want to thank you all, and I want to thank city staff for doing this. We wanted to get this information out and then also answer any questions. I am really looking forward to May 26th at 6 p.m. when Mr. Brockman, our mayor-elect, takes his oath of office. Thank you all.
Thank you.